Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Workforce Wednesday webinar, New Federal Opportunities to Bolster the Early Childhood Workforce. I'd like to share a few housekeeping items before we begin. All participants will be in a listen-only mode for the duration of this webcast. If you are participating live with us, you will receive a thank you email about 1 day after the event has ended. Within the thank you email, there will be a link for you to download the slide presentation as well as the certificate of attendance. Closed captions are available during today's event. You can turn those captions on or off by clicking on the CC button near the bottom of your screen. This event is being recorded and will be available on demand after it has processed, and it will also be sent to all of you. If you would like to ask a question, we encourage you to use the Q&A panel to submit those questions. The panelists will work to review and respond to questions posed in the Q&A, but they may not get to all of them during the course of this webcast. Any unanswered questions will be used to inform future materials and technical assistance. It is now my pleasure to turn the floor over to Martine Gordon. Martine, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Glenna. Hello and welcome. As Glenna said, I'm Martine. I work on early childhood development at the Administration for Children and Families in the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and I'll be your host for today. We have a stellar lineup of leaders from across federal government here to share info with you, and I'm really pleased to start off our conversation with a few surprise speakers. First, it is an honor to introduce Assistant Secretary for the Administration for Children and Families, January Contreras. Assistant Secretary Contreras was appointed by President Biden and confirmed by the Senate with bipartisan support, we might add, to lead the Administration for Children and Families. And throughout her career, Assistant Secretary Contreras has been motivated by a strong sense of duty to children and families, especially when they are facing their most difficult times. I'll just add on a personal note, she's one of the most thoughtful leaders I've had the pleasure of serving. Assistant Secretary Contreras, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much, Martine. I'm thrilled to be here today alongside all of you and so many of our incredible colleagues. And I'm especially excited to be here alongside our Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services, Javier Becerra. To stand with him in support of the early care and education workforce along so many of our peers is important to all of us. I'm proud to share Secretary Becerra is the first Latino to hold his office in our nation's history. Throughout his career, he has made it his priority to ensure that Americans have access to the affordable health care and services they need to thrive. From his days as a legal advocate to his time as California's Attorney General, Secretary Becerra has also served 12 terms in Congress. And during all of this time, all of his career, he's been a champion for leaving no one behind. And I can tell you with complete sincerity, and this team can tell you as well, that absolutely includes this country's early care and education workforce. So Secretary Becerra, thanks so much for joining us. I'll turn it over to you.
First, Assistant Secretary Contreras, thank you very much for letting me be part of this convening, and I hope that folks will find that not only do you learn a little bit, but you find out that you got more friends than you thought. To the entire team at the Administration of Children and Families, thank you for what you do every day. To our leaders from HRSA, from the Department of Education, the Department of Labor, who are here as well. Again, it's a great partnership. Thank you so much. And to each and every one of you, more than anything else, thank you for the work you've done in Head Start, in childcare centers, in homes, throughout the country, visiting programs. You've done the work that's made it possible for our kids to be able to grow up, not just healthy, but be ready to thrive. And so thank you for doing that, especially for surviving COVID and making it possible for so many families to do so as well. Your work benefits families in ways that only people who are parents and who have to go through this know so precisely well. As the father of 3 beautiful daughters who are now all working age, the brother of 3 sisters, and both the spouse and son of some forces of nature out there in this world, my wife and my mom, I will tell you that this is a great way to start the celebration of Women's Month. And this is Women's History Month, and we're going to celebrate it because we know that when it comes to childcare, healthcare, the population in this country that has been female has been at the forefront of being the champions to keep us all in a better place, health-wise and ready to prosper. So thank you all very much for that. Women have been the backbone of our health and human services system for a long time. I'm not saying anything new. They played a central role, not just in the workforce when it comes to healthcare, childcare, but in our communities and of course in our economy. We recognize the extraordinary contributions that women have made throughout history in every facet of society. And we must also ensure that our present day systems are rewarding that by the way they function at the highest level and provide all those who do the care with the type of recognition and reward that is deserved. I believe this administration, the Biden-Harris administration, knows what it's talking about and has made the right investments, billions of dollars in expanding access to care, lowering healthcare costs, decreasing disparities. Those are the types of things that make a difference, whether it's in maternal health, behavioral health, reproductive health, foster care, domestic violence. This administration has really stepped up and we've taken it to the next level. And I think that's why we're here today, right? High quality early childhood care and education must be within reach. But we know today, for too many folks, that care is unaffordable, inaccessible, and especially for low-income families, families of color, it becomes really, really difficult. This was the way it was before COVID hit and we had this pandemic. But the challenges have become even greater now in the past few years as a result of the pandemic. I know that the sector, this childcare sector, has lost some 80,000 jobs in the time of this pandemic. Many organizations that provide early care and education services today say it's almost impossible to locate skilled candidates to fill positions in their shops. Early childhood care and educational professionals are among the lowest paid in our country's workforces, yet they do some of the most important work. They are experts, they are skilled, they possess the type of talent that we would want to see when we're going to entrust our most precious resource to them. And it's sad to say, but early childhood teachers nationwide still earn, what is it, about $11.65 an hour. A significant percentage of early childhood care and education workers who are overwhelmingly women and often people of color still live in poverty. I remember the stories about some of my relatives who would care for or clean up for other families, how when they would come home to their own house, it was very difficult for them to do the very same work at home that they had to do as a job because they were too low on resources and didn't have much time. That's the travesty we face. That's why last month at HHS, we launched through Assistant Secretary Contreras' shop, we launched the National Early Care and Education Workforce Center, the ECE Workforce Center. That Workforce Center is a result of about a $30 million investment to support research, technical assistance to states, communities, territories, and tribal nations to improve recruitment and retention of a diverse, qualified workforce across early childhood care and education programs. It should help improve early childhood care and education workforce recruitment and retention because it's going to focus on career growth and better compensation for teachers, aides, and other caregivers. In addition, HHS has made a range of investments to grow and strengthen the early childhood workforce. In January, we announced the award of nearly $300 million in preschool development grants for birth through 5 for 42 states. That way they could provide critical resources to support the early childhood care and education system. As you know, from joining this webinar today, we have also hosted for over a year an early childhood care and education workforce resources webinar to promote updated programs and guidance and other information to early childhood grantees on how to use existing grant funds to advance the workforce. Now, this isn't a problem that was created overnight or that we're going to solve tonight, but it is an urgent situation that we have to address. The Biden-Harris administration is taking a whole of government approach so we can support early childhood care and education, working with partners like you, with our states, our territories, our tribes, and our communities across the country. At HHS, we will continue to do everything that we can in our power to make it easier for you, for your families, to afford high quality childcare, for you to continue to work in this sector, for you to find the innovation that we need to have drive this 21st century model of care for our families, and for you to be able to say that you want to encourage your children and your loved one and family and friends' children to go into this field. We won't stop until early educators and childcare providers can earn a living wage, make a decent salary, stand up a decent business, and have that peace of mind that comes with access to the security and support they deserve. So I hope you'll join with Assistant Secretary Contreras, our team at HHS, ACF, and all of us as we try to work together to make most of the opportunities we have today and to continue to push for the compensation and career opportunities that we all deserve to see you have and the future career force have. So thank you for joining. Thank you for being part of this effort to keep America moving. And thank you very much for being committed to the next generation of leaders. Secretary Contreras, I hand it back over to you.
Thanks so much, Secretary. And as you said, investing in the early care and education workforce, it's the right thing to do for young children, and it's simply an economic imperative. Families need that. I've had the honor of leading the Administration for Children and Families for close to a year now, and I've seen firsthand that supporting early care and education is a priority of Secretary Becerra and the entire Biden-Harris administration. In fact, here at ACF, we've announced it as one of our top priorities to support the human services workforce, with early care and education being a critical part of that. I want to spotlight how important this is for women and women of color. We know that childcare workers and early educators are mostly women, with a significant portion of women of color and immigrant women. We know it's one of the lowest paying professions in the country. And as we heard from providers throughout the country, we know that they're experiencing high rates of anxiety, of depression. These are the challenges that we're committed to addressing. Workforce shortages do create even more stress. It creates burnout for those who are continuing to do this important work. A recent survey of more than 1,200 early educators found that 1 in 3 who answered reported about their thoughts about leaving the field. Together, we know that we can change this. I know that I was inspired when I learned that more than 200,000 childcare providers in every state have received federal relief funds. And those who received federal stabilization funds are earning more. They're more likely to report good mental health. And many reported that they would have closed their programs were it not for those federal resources. When I have had site visits to childcare centers and preschools, I get the privilege of being among laughing kids, sometimes having a little bit of mocos or runny noses with them, running around with capes on Superhero Day in Berkeley, celebrating Mardi Gras in Louisiana, and demonstrating traditional dances in the Pueblo Jamish in New Mexico. These are incredible experiences for me because we see the power of quality early learning and care. But I also make sure in each of those visits that I also am sitting down with leadership and with staff to hear the challenges that they are facing so we can continue to drive policy informed by them. That's informed by all of you. Thank you for that. Head Start programs are also using relief funds to innovate, and they're finding new ways to support compensation, wellness, and career advancement for their staff. But we know there is more work to do. The value that caregivers and early educators offer our communities is immeasurable to make sure that parents can work and young children have the best possible experiences and opportunities for success. It's why I'm so excited that ACF has convened our team today. You're going to learn about resources and opportunities from across the federal government that hopefully you can use back home to further support the early care and education workforce. I also want to express my thanks to our colleagues, as the Secretary did, from the Department of Labor, the Department of Education, and our HHS colleagues at HRSA, the Health Resources and Services Administration. We know it's going to take the full strength of the federal government to solve this problem and to support the early childhood workforce. It's time that we stopped relying on this workforce to shoulder the burden of financing childcare alongside the families they serve. I encourage you to use this time to ask a lot of questions, and I hope that you keep in touch with our team beyond today. As we heard from Secretary Becerra, we are in this with you. And on that note, I'm going to hand it over to the leader of our early childhood team at ACF, our Deputy Assistant Secretary, Katie Ham. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Assistant Secretary Contreras and Secretary Becerra. The presence of leadership here today and the presence of colleagues across the federal government, I think really underscores the commitment that the Biden-Harris administration has to the early care and education workforce. We're delighted to be able to share with you some opportunities to bolster the workforce. We're going to talk about everything from ways to improve compensation to apprenticeship models. And we're thrilled that you'll be hearing from so many folks today about how we can leverage resources that recently passed Congress to support this important workforce that we all rely on to support our children and our families, our communities, and our economy. So if you want to go to the next slide, fresh off the press, today there's a Dear Colleague letter out from myself as well as some ACF colleagues talking about the specific funding increases across the early childhood resources that we distribute here at ACF. You can check that out for links to strategies and how to use those dollars and get more specific information. I encourage you to check that out. The link is in the chat. If you click on that, you will be directed to our Dear Colleague letter. So as I mentioned, the Administration for Children and Families has 4 funding streams for early care and education. I'm going to talk through each of those 4 funding streams, what resources are available, and how to access them. So if we want to go to the next slide, I am going to start with Head Start. So again, the funding package that the president signed at the end of last year includes a $960 million increase for Head Start. I'm going to walk through the breakdown for those funds. So if you are a current Head Start grant recipient, you can apply to receive 2 types of funding. One is a cost of living or COLA adjustment. It's a 5.6% increase. And the second is for quality improvement. And again, all current grant recipients are eligible for that. You just have to apply and fill out the paperwork and you'll receive those funds. The COLA funding can be used as an across the board increase for wages. It can also be used with an application and approval for differential increases if there are places where wages are especially low and need to come up more, or there are places where a higher increase is needed in order to recruit people into those positions. In addition, there is quality improvement funding. There is some flexibility in how our grant recipients use these funds. We're very strongly encouraging Head Start grant recipients to use these quality funds to support the early childhood workforce. That includes increasing wages and benefits and other supports for the workforce to retain and recruit staff. The other area where we are encouraging the use of those funds is for mental health. As Assistant Secretary Contreras mentioned, we know that mental health issues, especially in the wake of the pandemic, are especially acute for children, for families, and for staff. So we encourage you to use resources for that purpose as well. We're going to link to a program instruction that provides more information on how to use these quality funds. The second opportunity is $2 million in tribal colleges and university Head Start partnerships. This is a funding opportunity for institutes of higher education, specifically tribal colleges and universities. And we will be putting out a funding announcement for how to apply for those funds. The goal is to increase the number of qualified staff working in American Indian and Alaska Native Head Start and Early Head Start programs. There is also $100 million for Early Head Start and Head Start expansion. These are competitively awarded to programs to expand access and meet the needs for infant and toddler care in their community. We will be posting an opportunity for these funds in the coming months, and they will be awarded by the end of September. The Office of Head Start has made clear in a program instruction released last September that programs need to be identifying ways to structure their budget and their programmatic resources to sustainably increase wages. That means that expectation will be present in these expansion funds too. We are interested in across the board Head Start resources being used in a way that provides sustainable and fair wages for the staff. And we'll be building that into this expansion opportunity. If you have any questions about, and then before I move on, I do want to mention there'll also be $15 million for expansion specifically to American Indian and Alaska Native, programs with the expectation that we are finding ways to sustainably increase wages within our program funds. If you have any questions, you can contact the Office of Head Start staff in your regional office, and they can share more information. You can also look at the resources that have been put in the chat for how to use Head Start resources in ways that will bolster the early childhood workforce. The largest increase in ACF is $1.85 billion in Child Care and Development Block Grant funds. These funds are distributed to states, tribes, and territories that then use these funds to support childcare providers, to support quality initiatives, and to directly support families and defray the cost of childcare. We've held up several examples of ways that states are using these funds to bolster the early childhood workforce. One area we really want to highlight is improving provider payment rates. Currently, many state rates are too low to support a fair wage for providers. So increasing those payment rates allows providers to pay higher wages and is an important strategy. Those funds can also be used for recruitment and retention bonuses, offering additional benefits, and focusing on career pathways and how we bring in a strong pipeline of diverse workers that make this field so competent when it comes to providing for the needs of children and families. If we want to go to the next slide, we'll talk briefly about preschool development grants. You heard from the secretary. We have awarded $300 million to 42 states. These are funds that broadly support children birth to 5 in early childhood systems. These are fairly flexible funds for states and territories. These grant funds are administered by different entities within the state, so you can find out who your state's preschool development grant lead is and how the funds are being used within the state. But we have really encouraged states to use these funds to focus on the workforce. We know we have grantees in West Virginia that are going to use their planning grant to improve workforce retention bonuses and sustain those following ARP. Delaware is going to be working with institutions of higher education to focus on making early childhood coursework available in other languages that are not English. We've heard from other states, again, that are going to be using these additional funds to improve the compensation in the pipeline for the early childhood workforce, and definitely look into what your state's doing and how those funds can be used to support the workforce. There's a $25 million increase for PDG in the resources that were made available under the FY23 omnibus. So there'll be even more opportunities for states to sustain and expand in the coming years. We're going to put some information in the chat about how these funds have been used in the past and examples for how they can be used to support the early childhood workforce. And keep an eye out in the next several months for information on how to apply for new awards under PDG. If we want to go to the next slide, I'm going to just highlight briefly the Early Childhood Workforce Center. You heard about this in the opening remarks from our leadership. We're really excited about this opportunity to support all of our grantees. That includes states, territories, tribes, and local grantees, including Head Start. In the coming months, we'll be providing information about how grantees can access the technical assistance provided by the Workforce Center. Later this spring, we'll be bringing you a webinar to talk more about that and how to get involved and benefit from these resources. And last but not least, I want to highlight some additional opportunities in the Tribal Maternal Infant and Early Childhood Home Visiting Program. In partnership with HRSA, we administer the tribal portion of home visiting. Dr. Warren is here with us today from HRSA, and we'll talk more about resources available to states and territories. But want to highlight that the omnibus included a reauthorization of home visiting, and that included additional resources for tribal grantees. That includes federally recognized tribes, tribal organizations, and urban Indian organizations. We have 2 NOFOs that are available to award $28 million. We provided the links. Definitely check those out if you are a tribe or tribal organization so you can apply for home visiting funds. And with that, I will turn it over to my colleague, Martine, who will introduce Dr. Warren and other colleagues to talk about opportunities throughout the federal government. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Katie. Friends, I know some of you are asking for the link to the Dear Colleague letter. Y'all are hearing about it first, like really first. We released it this morning to our email listserv. And the link isn't even live yet. That's how early you're hearing about it. So we'll be sending it along with the materials after the webinar, but you will have that as soon as the link is live, we assure you. We're gonna, please keep those questions coming in the Q&A box as I hand the proverbial mic over to Michael Warren, Associate Administrator for the Maternal and Child Health Bureau at the Health Resources Service Administration, or HRSA. Michael, thanks for joining us today to share about funding increases and other provisions in the recent reauthorization of the Maternal, Infant, and Early Childhood Home Visiting Program. I want to do a little cheer, rah-rah for that. I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Martine. We are all still doing cheers and rah-rahs for that. It is an exciting time. And I want to thank our colleagues at ACF, and in particular, Katie Ham, for having us be a part of this event today. I'm going to talk a little bit about McV and how we work to support and strengthen the home visiting workforce. Just a little bit of an introduction in the beginning on the next slide to what is McV. So the Maternal, Infant, Early Childhood Home Visiting Program, which has been around since 2010. This program is about voluntary evidence-based home visiting. It's based on decades of research that show when a trained home visitor, someone like a nurse, a social worker, an early childhood specialist, a community health worker, go into homes and provide care, that outcomes are better for children and families. And so this program supports pregnant people and parents of young children up through kindergarten. We're in all 50 states, the District of Columbia, and 5 U.S. territories. And as you can see on this slide, we have extensive reach, reaching about 140,000 parents and children in the most recent year through nearly 1 million home visits. And why do we do these home visits? I mentioned this decades of research that show these visits improve maternal and child health. They do that by doing things like preventing child abuse and neglect, working to help parents improve child development and school readiness, and making sure that families are connected to resources that they need, whether those are health or social services resources that they need to be able to thrive. Importantly, we partner with our colleagues at the Administration for Children and Families on Tribal McV, which supports tribal communities to offer these same services. Next slide, please. So when we think about the workforce that's needed for home visiting, home visitors are just amazing. I will tell you, my first interaction with a home visitor came when I was a third-year medical student. So I trained as a pediatrician, and during my pediatric clerkship as a third-year medical school student, they said, you're going to spend a day with a home visitor. So you're going to actually go out with a home visitor and follow a family that you saw in the hospital. So this was in December. It was cold in Eastern North Carolina, and I went out on a home visit with a public health nurse to a family that I had seen in newborn nursery and discharged from the hospital. And one of the things that struck me on this cold December morning, we drive up. This family lived in a home, and when we walked in, there was a very strong sense of cold in the room, and I learned really quickly it's because there was a giant hole in the floor, and so this room where the mother and the grandmother and the baby all were was not too much warmer than the outside room. And what dawned on me really quickly was all the things I learned in medical school about the clinical care of the baby didn't matter much if that family's needs outside of the clinic weren't being met. And the home visitor very suddenly became one of the most important people on that care team to help provide that really comprehensive view of what kids and families really need. And so my admiration for home visitors goes way back, and I'm so excited to be able to work at HRSA and support home visitors across the country. Home visitors help to identify developmental milestones, but also those social and health resources that families may need. They are knowledgeable about resources in the community, ways to make referrals, strategies to get families the resources that they need, and they are very skilled at engaging families. They come from a variety of backgrounds. They might be nurses, they might be social workers, they might have training in early childhood education or parenting education or even lactation education. They are really superstars, and they do this work despite a number of challenges. We hear from our home visiting colleagues across the country there are major challenges with recruiting and retaining home visitors, that sometimes once we get home visitors in a program, it is difficult for them to have opportunities for career advancements. It can be difficult to compete with salaries that are often higher in other fields outside of home visiting. Their workloads can be high, and all of these things can lead to challenges with their own wellness and challenges with having the emotional supports that they need. I'm excited to share with you some resources that I think are going to help with that, but I do think it's important to note that these challenges are very real, and they have certainly been exacerbated during the last few years as we've all been responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. Next slide. So what are we doing at HRSA to support the home visiting workforce? Well, Martine mentioned just as I was coming on about the reauthorization, really excited that at the end of last calendar year, the Congress passed and President Biden signed the Appropriations Act, which reauthorized McV. Not only did it reauthorize McV, but it increased the funding quite a bit so that over 5 years, we will double the overall funding for the McV program. Starting this fiscal year, the funding for base awards, so those are the awards that those 50 states, DC, and 5 territories get every year, the funding for those will increase. So this is a great way to expand home visiting services in communities, to be able to bring on additional home visitors that can help with workload. States and territories can also use this to address home visitor compensation for those folks who are working for them. Importantly, there's also a set aside, meaning part of this overall budget for home visiting is set aside specifically focused on workforce. So helping us think about workforce support, retention, and case management. So as part of that, the Congress specified there would be a Jackie Walorski Center for Evidence-Based Case Management, named in memory of late Congresswoman Walorski. And we will also support an Institute for Home Visiting Workforce Development with these funds. In addition to that, we have supported and will continue to support a technical assistance resource center. That resource center is available to our state and territory awardees, as well as local home visiting implementing agencies, to be able to address issues that emerge in the field of home visiting and to provide resources that can support the workforce. And we've also done through our program a round of McV Innovation Awards to address emerging issues. And I just want to give a shout out to our colleagues down in Georgia. In 2017, the Georgia Department of Public Health received one of those innovation awards, and they specifically focused on workforce. They started out with a needs assessment to identify training needs. From that, they created a home visiting leadership academy, which was open to home visitors in their state to be able to provide resources and education and support for some of those issues that were identified in the needs assessment. And they also worked on strengthening that workforce intake from educational institutions. So they partnered with 62 colleges and technical schools across the state to make sure that folks knew about home visiting as a field and as a career opportunity, and to be able to engage folks into this work moving forward. Next slide, please. A few other resources that I want to make sure you know about. I mentioned the Institute for Home Visiting Workforce Development and the Jackie Walorski Center for Evidence-Based Case Management. Our NOFO, or Notice of Funding Opportunity, for that will be posting later this spring. The link on the slide shows you the grants forecast, and you can get a bit more information on that, but be on the lookout for that. We also have a national resource that's available, the Institute for the Advancement of Family Support Professionals. This was developed through one of those innovation awards a few years ago, or in part through one of those innovation awards. And it's a great resource that anybody in the field can access. And then in partnership with our colleagues at ACF, we support something called SAS-HV, the Supporting and Strengthening Home Visiting Workforce Project. And this research project has generated a number of planning tools, briefs, reports on the well-being of home visitors as professionals, and also very concrete tools on things like reflective supervision. So for those of you who may be watching and you're an existing home visiting grantee, we will be sharing information very shortly about those base awards and what you will need to do to fill out your annual application for those. Our team will be publishing that through the channels that they already have in place to connect with you. For folks who may be interested in these additional opportunities, be on the lookout, and we will look forward to hearing from you and moving forward together. Thank you so much for all that you do, for the difference you make every single day for kids and families. You showing up to work every day really just makes a world of difference in their lives, and we thank you for that. Back to Martine.
Thank you, Michael, so much. Y'all have the contact information for Dr. Warren on his slides, and we will be sharing the slides and all of the links that may or may not be working for you in the chat right now. You will get those in an email as follow-up as well. In addition to these wonderful new resources for home visitors, we're very excited to have Katie Nees join us today. She is Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Office of Special Education and Rehabilitation Services at the Department of Education. Katie, I know you have lots to share about funding for Part C, for Part B, funding for special education personnel, so I'll let you take it away.
Great. Thanks, Martine, and good afternoon, everybody. If we could go to the next slide, that'd be great. I just wanted to briefly run through where we ended up in this year's appropriations bill. The early intervention program that serves infants and toddlers with disabilities and their families saw a nice increase of $47 million. The next state grant program under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act is the preschool services under Section 619. And that got an increase of about 10, there's a typo there, it should be 10.5 million, my apologies. Our largest program is the program for grants to states that serve elementary and secondary age students. That received an increase of 850 million for a total of 14.2 billion. And while not one of the biggest increases, but one that we are most excited about among the things is our increase in professional support to the workforce. I would say, especially for the infants and toddlers program, that what we are hearing from states is the challenges related to staffing shortages, and that shortages in occupational physical speech therapists, in child development specialists, and special education teachers, and especially those things remain true in the preschool program and in the K-12 program. States can use these funds for personnel, and just given the huge shortages, we know that that's a lot of what states use these funds for. On our professional preparation side, this extra $20 million is one that we are focusing on the needs globally of students with disabilities. One of the things that we've done in the past that we intend to do in the future is collaboration between four-year universities and community colleges to try to help increase the pipeline of individuals who can become special education teachers by marrying the curriculum in community colleges with a four-year university, so that if folks want to get their associate's degree, those credits and that experience will transfer to that four-year degree. We're excited about what that can mean for the infrastructure, especially in early childhood, to have those folks in the pipeline and have the supports they need to meet the needs of students with disabilities. If we go to the next slide, we just awarded last year a National Early Childhood Intervention Personnel Equity Center. This is housed at the University of Connecticut in partnership with Georgetown University, the Federation for Families with Children with Special Healthcare Needs, and the Division of Early Childhood of the Council of Exceptional Children. And it's really designed to help states attract, retain a more diverse workforce to meet the needs of all the students who are in early education, students with disabilities. This field is predominantly middle-class white women, and their students are predominantly not middle-class white women. And so we really wanted to have an infrastructure in place to help states attract folks who will stay in early childhood special education and early intervention, who can help meet the needs of the families that they want to serve. We're looking at not only working at the state level, but also working with institutions of higher education to facilitate creation and adoption of curricula so that universities can train people to be able to deliver high quality services to a diverse population. And part of that is attracting and retaining high quality university faculty who are people of color, people from diverse backgrounds who can be a part of this. I also want to echo what Michael was saying about home visiting. The home visiting early intervention partnership, the home visiting special education partnership is one that just has tremendous value for children and families. And so we're just beyond thrilled to see the kinds of increases there and the partnerships between the special education, early childhood programs, because we really think it will help expand the capacity of communities to meet the needs of these families. So really thinking that there's lots of room for optimism as we go forward. The last thing I'll say is we absolutely recognize that there are critical shortages at all levels of education, and that early childhood is among the most critical of these shortages. And we hope that these funds, states can really leverage these tools, not only to attract people, but to really keep them in the system, because we know we're never going to be able to replace people over and over and over again if we don't hold on to them. So let me turn it back to Martine, and thank you again for the opportunity to be here today. And we're just thrilled with this ongoing partnership.
Thank you so much, Katie. Friends, we see those questions coming in the Q&A box. I hope you see that we're trying to answer them as they come in, but please keep them coming. I know we're throwing a lot of information at you. We're happy to continue to respond. I'll now turn it over to another Department of Education colleague, Amy Lloyd. Amy is Assistant Secretary for Career, Technical, and Adult Education and has a lot to share about new career and technical education funding and the omnibus, and how CTE programs can use those funds to advance career pipelines. Thanks, Amy.
Thank you so much, Martine. And thank you everyone for inviting us to be here and to talk with you today. I'm thrilled to be here, and I'll echo Secretary Becerra and say happy Women's History Month. And I'll say it's not just about history, it's about celebrating the role of women every single day. And it's not just this month, it's every single month of the year that we should do so. But this topic of early childhood education, early care is near and dear to the administration, to our Gender Policy Council, to the Department of Education, and to OCTAE, because we know disproportionately predominantly women are in these professions, predominantly women of color, and too often they earn poverty wages. And I've read, and others have said previously in this session that, that nearly 1 in 3 childcare workers go hungry. Over half of them are eligible for public assistance. And when we think about increased high quality early childhood education and childcare, we know that more women, especially young women who are launching their careers, would be able to engage in the labor market. So in my role as the Assistant Secretary at the Office of Career, Technical, and Adult Education, all of my work is at the intersection of education, workforce development, and economic development. And I have 2 big bodies of work relevant to early childhood that I want to talk with you about today: career and technical education and adult education and family literacy. This photo is from a site visit that my team did recently to a school called Berea Public Charter School here in DC. It's a school that provides a powerful 2-gen approach for immigrants and newcomers and their children. So it's a school that provides both early childhood education, and this is a glimpse into their classroom for children who are 6 weeks through 5 years old. It also provides family integration, which is like child development lessons, co-education times for parents with their young children to focus on family literacy. And it provides adult education, which provides basic through advanced English classes, high school equivalency, and workforce development programs, including one of the workforce development programs that they offer is a child development associate program that helps students provide, high quality care and education as early childhood teachers, home visitors, or even directors of licensed childcare homes or centers. And so I wanted to bring up this photo and share an illustrative example of how adult education, which is one of the bodies of work in my portfolio, directly contributes to 2-gen strategies, practitioners of early childhood care and education, and building a talent pipeline for early childhood education. Next slide, please. This is one of my favorite cartoons from my hometown journalist, from a fellow who is a cartoonist for the Albuquerque Journal. And I've been using this cartoon for almost 10 years now to show what is often considered a regressive cycle of blame, but to really instead flip that and look through the other end of the telescope and think about the inherent interdependence of education, workforce development, and economic development. Some of you may have seen, I was really glad to see that it got so much press this week that when our colleagues over at the Department of Commerce recently released on Monday their notice of funding opportunities for the Chips and Science Act around semiconductor and microchip manufacturing, they are requiring that companies who are seeking at least $150 million in funding from an overall $52 billion semiconductor law, that they have to submit a plan for how they're going to provide affordable childcare for their workers. And Secretary Raimondo and Commerce are big advocates for this, as are we all. Commerce said that lack of affordable and accessible childcare is one of the largest constraints keeping Americans, and especially women, out of the labor workforce. And this is just emblematic of our whole of government approach to consider early childhood education as an essential issue to 3 core issues, or essential solution, to 3 core issues. So one is that we want to ensure that our most precious resources, our little ones, have a great foundation for learning and connections with others, which we know will be a springboard to lifelong success in school, healthy lives, and connections to communities. 2 is ensuring that parents can pursue good jobs and strengthen our nation's workforce. And 3 is really ensuring that business and industry has a stable workforce, reduces their turnover and associated costs, and allows our economy to grow and thrive. So I really think about how important it is for us to think holistically about the role of early childhood in our whole education, workforce, and economic development systems. Next slide, please. Specifically, the significant grant programs that my office oversees are, Perkins and Title II of WIOA. So Perkins is career and technical education, and we're really excited that the administration has grown funding for CTE to $1.43 billion this fiscal year. And this funds CTE across secondary and post-secondary institutions. It's a plus up for both our state grant formulas, and we have a new grant program for career-connected high schools that I'll speak to in a little bit. And we also have the adult education and family literacy, which the charter school example that I was speaking to previously for the 2-gen strategy is part of our adult education services, also got an increase in $25 million. And adult education serves, adults of many walks of life, those without a high school equivalency, those with low levels of literacy or numeracy, immigrants and newcomers to our country who may have advanced degrees from their home countries, but need English literacy and pathways to citizenship. We do a lot of work in integrated education and training programs. And we, recognize that as of early 2020, we know the childcare sector lost almost 80,000 jobs due to the pandemic. And we know the pandemic has only exposed and deepened and widened what have been longstanding inequities in our education system from early childhood through higher education. And we can't just return to normal because normal wasn't working for all of us. We know that our education system as it was 3 years ago was deeply inequitable. We know the return on investment in high quality early learning is high and long lasting. And yet we also know that a very small percentage of Black and Latino children are enrolled in high quality state supported early learning opportunities. And we know families of color are more likely than white families to live in childcare deserts across the board. Like the majority of households struggle to find adequate care for their young children. And we see early childhood providers like not being able to support families because they lack childcare slots. So through both adult education and our career and technical education, we want to increase career pathways into early childhood for youth and adults. And simultaneously, we want to increase the job quality of these positions so that they truly provide economic and social mobility to the workers in them and excellent education to the young people in them as well. Next slide, please. A quick note about our new grant program called Career Connected High Schools. These are the four core pillars for how we're thinking about this work. And we're envisioning that this would focus on in-demand industry sectors, such as the care economy and early childhood in particular. So it's a new program that could be used to focus on early childhood education. And we know across the country, there are countless high quality career and technical education, early childhood education programs that are really designed already to teach students the aspects of teaching and working with young children, and where students are exploring career pathways and applying theoretical concepts to real life situations. But I think about how we would take these four pillars of expanding dual enrollment, connecting work-based learning, and increasing industry-sought credentials against the backdrop of supporting young people through career advising and navigation supports. And I think about a place like Delaware, where the Early Childhood Teacher Academy pathway is engaging students in developing, frankly, a realistic understanding of the early childhood education and care landscape while exploring the importance and impact of teachers. And so their program is an exemplar, has work-based learning embedded in it with job shadowing and mock interviews and mentorships. And they have credentials embedded into it with Praxis Early Childhood Education and CPR and First Aid. And students in it in high school are earning up to 12 credits at Delaware Tech Community College. So they're getting that early college credit and getting career advising. So that's the kind of systems that span business and industry, K-12 and higher ed that we want to bring together in support of early childhood. Next slide, please. This is just a quick slide to elevate that ed is not alone in supporting this vision for reimagining education to be more career connected. We recently launched in November a new initiative called Unlocking Career Success, and I have the website listed here and at the end of my slides as well, in which, in fact, the person who will present right after me, Manny Lamar, is in the background of this photo. We were joined by the Departments of Labor and Commerce and the Office of the First Lady alongside the Department of Education to co-launch an initiative in which we're really trying to reimagine high school to put every single young person, not just those in high quality CTE, but every young person on a strong track to a career. And we know that education is an industry sector across the board, as my colleague Katie was saying, that needs a lot of attention and support, and early childhood in particular is a sector that we would want to elevate within our Unlocking Career Success work. Next slide. I just wanted to say, like, this, while this is not directly in my office at Octave, because we love to speak in acronyms in the federal government, there are a couple other pieces of the puzzle that I wanted to unpack for this group. One is C-Campus grants, which I hope that you're aware of. This is from our Office of Post-Secondary Education, and it provides campus-based childcare services in institutions of higher education for low-income parents, and is a way to, increase equitable engagement in higher education and also strengthen the early childhood education space. And then also wanted to note that early childhood educators who are working at nonprofits qualify for public service loan forgiveness. And this includes licensed or regulated childcare, Head Start, and state-funded pre-kindergarten. So want to make sure that those who are eligible for PSLF, again, the acronym, apply for it, because we are really leaning in at the department and ensuring that everybody who deserves this loan forgiveness and has earned it gets it. And then I also wanted to mention that we have a basic needs task force within the Department of Education in partnership with our colleagues across the whole of government, where we're thinking about basic needs beyond just housing stability and food stability, which are essential, don't get me wrong, to also think about basic needs for students, to include childcare, to include mental health, to include digital equity, and a whole bunch of other dimensions. So as we're thinking about how we at the department internally and how we're working across our federal family are thinking about early care, our basic needs task force is a group that meets regularly to think about these problems of practice and how we might bring policy and funding to bear to help solve them. And then across the board, the department's committed to addressing the teacher shortage that's facing so many communities across the country. So happy to talk more about teacher shortage and early childhood in particular, if people would like to follow up on that. Next slide, please. Oh, look, I'm done. Okay. I will say that we've seen some great state examples of strengthening career pathways and professional development, and states have been innovative in using American Rescue Plan funds, for example. So in Arkansas, we saw states covering scholarship for early childhood teachers to obtain a degree or credential in the field while they're working with young children. So it's a nice kind of earn and learn model. And the funding's disseminated by the Arkansas Early Childhood Association using the National Teach Model. California has an online platform with courses and multilingual resources to help expand pathways to become early childhood educators. And the state's been investing in mentoring for educators and a program to match community colleges with experienced early childhood providers. And Kentucky is, training apprentice candidates. So looking at the realm of apprenticeship, and this will be a good moment to pass the baton to the Department of Labor in this space. So we would love to hear what you are doing in this space and elevate your best practices in our websites and in our resources. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Amy. I feel like you don't really need me to introduce Manny since he was in the background of one of your slides, but just officially Manny, I will do so. We're very happy to have you. Manny Lamar is Senior Advisor with the Employment and Training Administration at the Department of Labor. Manny, I know you're going to tell us all about workforce investments coming out of labor, and so take it away.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Martine. If you could change this next slide. And thank you, Amy, and all of my colleagues. It's been really, quite frankly, great hearing and just being in the background, hearing and learning from you all. Again, I'm at the Employment and Training Administration. Just really briefly, and I think Katie and others said this, I'll just start by saying, one, that the Department of Labor is in this with you as well, and echo that sentiment. And particularly when we think about the early care and education workforce. I'll take a step back and say, in terms of our mission of the Employment and Training Administration, is that our mission is to contribute to the more efficient functioning of the U.S. labor market by providing high quality job training, employment and training, labor market information, and income maintenance, primarily through our state and local workforce board and workforce development system. The reason why I mentioned that is we just launched our ETA 2030, and there's 4 key priorities in the ETA 2030. One is around opening up opportunities for vulnerable workers and communities. 2 is around building new industry partnerships that leads to good jobs. 3 is taking action today for the future of work. And this is where I'll use the transition of the 4th one to speak specifically to early care and education workforce, which is building a better care economy. So in our explicit ETA vision that we've articulated within the administration, early care, the care economy broadly speaking, has been an intentional focus, and it's specifically articulated as one of the 4 visions and priorities that we'll continue to work on. And it's been really, quite frankly, great working with partners like Amy and Octay, Katie, and others to really, continue to learn and thinking strategically, because this is really a whole government approach, how we can do better and engage across the board, whether it's HHS, Department of Ed, Department of Labor, how we can work together. So it's been a pleasure working across with you all. Now, I'll just mention some examples on this slide here. So when we think about the early care and education workforce, at the Department of Labor, we're thinking about it through a variety of lenses, but in particular, we're looking at it from kind of 3 angles. One is around learning. And when we say learning, and some specific example is we have an RFI, request for information, on sector strategy. And really, it's really to get a better understanding of the goals, interests, concerns, challenges, best practices, promising practices of sector approaches to some of the work. And in particular, early care and education. So if you're not familiar, or you'd like to provide comment on the RFI on sector strategy, we'd encourage you to do so, because that will help inform us as we think strategically about some of our future investments. Secondly, one concrete example that we're leveraging is our Job Quality Academy. Through our partners, our state and local workforce system, and our partners on the ground, community-based organizations, worker-centered organizations, we're launching a Job Quality Academy. And that Job Quality Academy is really about bringing partnerships and stakeholders to the table to really think strategically around these specific challenges and opportunity around how we can improve and support the early care and education workforce. And you can learn more about it. We'll provide the link. We have the link in the slide where you can learn more about it. But in particular, we're encouraging our local state and local workforce partners to really think strategically about bringing new stakeholders to the table, new partners to really think strategically around some challenges and opportunities in the sector. I will say is in the spring, we'll launch $15 million to support really transformative efforts for the public workforce system in partnership with industry and worker-centered organizations. And again, a theme will be around improving job quality, good jobs, career pathways, and quite frankly, at the Department of Labor, those are consistent themes that we're working across: job quality, good jobs, and how we're thinking strategically around equity, ensuring that. And I know, quite a few others mentioned it as well, around the importance of being thoughtful and intentional, because we know that particularly women and women of color, in particular in these sectors, we want to think more strategically and more intentional about supporting this pipeline and opportunity. The other thing I'll mention, and I think this is really important in terms of like very concrete things. One is the Job Quality Academy, the sector grants that we plan to roll out, where the care economy, early care in particular, will be highlighted. But registered apprenticeship intermediaries. So as part of the Department of Labor, we also oversee the registered apprenticeship system in the U.S. We work with our state apprenticeship agencies or directly with the Office of Apprenticeship to develop and scale high quality registered apprenticeship programs. And this is another opportunity to shout out the Department of Education, because we've been working strategically and intentionally with them around thinking strategically around teacher apprenticeships. And I should say, I began my career as a kindergarten teacher. I thought I had a lot of energy until I started working in kindergarten, although I recognize that early care and early childhood is even younger than that, quite frankly. But I mentioned the registered apprenticeship intermediary is because we fund the Department of Labor. We oversee registered apprenticeships across the U.S. In support with our state apprenticeship agencies and the Office of Apprenticeship. We fund what we call industry intermediaries, and industry intermediaries are organizations that can provide support, and we provide those funding where they provide free technical assistance to support in the development of registered apprenticeship programs. I particularly want to highlight District 199C. They partner with SEIU, they partner with healthcare and other sponsors of organizations to help develop early childhood registered apprenticeships. Right now, they are a statewide sponsor in the state of Pennsylvania, but they're working across the board to expand opportunities. But again, our registered apprenticeship intermediaries are that opportunity. And we do see this too as continuing to advance equity, because registered apprenticeship provides paid work-based experience with the mentorship and education that leads to nationally recognized credentials. And we know when we think about the career pathway, at least, and particularly on the workforce, we want individuals to be paid while they're learning on the job, because we know otherwise it will leave out, quite frankly, other state. We will create inequities in that as well. So those are some key things. And then I'll transition to the next slide to highlight some very specific resources that I think it's helpful for you all to be aware of. In particular, you heard me reference this specifically, but state and local workforce boards, if you're not familiar with them, you should be familiar with them. They fund proven work-based learning strategies such as OJT, which is on-the-job training, RA, which is registered apprenticeships, transitional jobs, customized training, cohort training, and think of them as partners on the ground as it relates to building two things. One is supportive services. So let's say you're working to develop a career pathway program for in the early care and early childhood space. They can provide, as partners, connect you to funds that we provide through what's called the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act to supportive services to connect, particularly around when we think about childcare and some of the unique challenges and that. In addition to the supportive services angle, they can also work directly with you to think strategically around developing career pathways and career training programs. And we have a link as well where you can find your local workforce board, as well as American Job Centers. The American Job Centers, we have over 2,400 across the country, but they provide free help to job seekers and a variety of career and employment opportunities as well. I mentioned earlier before, but our registered apprenticeship and intermediaries is a really key opportunity and a strategy to connect, to build pathways for early care and the early care workforce. Apprenticeship.gov has tons of resources, but in particular, two that I'll highlight is our partner finder. Our partner finder is where you can go and find and identify particular partners within within a particular sector, where you can reach out to them and think strategically about partnership. But as well as what I referenced earlier about our intermediaries, and of course, we're more than willing to make some connections to the intermediary, the District 199C in particular, that works directly in this space. The other two things I'll mention is we have a new centralized grants homepage. And so again, if you're not familiar with some of our investments that we have in the Department of Labor, we even provide what we call now a forecast flyer, where you can actually see all of the funds, all of our investments. We have both formula funds, but we also have a lot of discretionary competitive dollars. And so if you go to dol.gov/grants, you can actually see some of our grants, and you'll see that, as the care economy and being able to apply for any of these. We also have an interactive map that shows various DOL grantees. And again, the reason why I think it's important to highlight this, just the way at the federal level we're working across partners, across federal agencies, for the work to happen, we know it needs to go down to the local level, but in particular, we need to have, build partnerships around it as well. So those are some of the key things and resources within the Department of Labor around the early care and workforce that I wanted to highlight as well. So thank you all. Happy Women's History, first day of Women's History Month. And thank you to my colleagues for such a great information. And thank you all for joining and being so passionate and caring about this topic. Thank you. I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Manny, so much. Friends, as you know, we had a lot of great content. We continue to have great content. We could talk about this for weeks on end, but we're unfortunately running low on time. You've been putting your questions in the Q&A, and our panelists have actually been answering those live. So if you want to throw in an additional questions, any that are unanswered, we will try to take those back and follow up with a follow-up email and see if we can get them answered for you. But it is 2:12 p.m. Eastern time, and I know a lot of you need to get back to your day jobs. So we are going to keep those questions in the Q&A. Folks will keep answering those via the chat function, but we're going to actually start to close out. I want to thank all of our panelists for coming together, for being here with us today, our special guest speakers, Secretary Becerra and Assistant Secretary Contreras. We're really delighted that they were able to join us and you were able to hear from them directly. And thank you all of you for taking the time to attend and staying with us through all of this content. What you see on your screen right now is some additional resources we want to highlight from the Administration for Children and Families in particular. So this is the site where you will find that Dear Colleague letter when it is posted, but we will also send you the link. There's also lots of other resources on this particular site specifically geared towards early childhood workforce strategies, examples from states, territories, tribes, and other resources here. And if you go to the next slide, thank you. We also, as you all probably know, because you're signed up for this webinar, but if you got this forwarded from a friend or a colleague, and you're not already signed up yourself, we do have these types of webinars monthly on different topics related to the early care education workforce, in addition to e-blasts that we send out over email with additional content. You can sign up by, I believe we're going to put a link in the chat. or you can email us directly at earlychildhooddevelopment@acf.hhs.gov, and we will get you signed up, or send us any questions additionally that you might have, and we do check this email and respond to it directly. Thank you again for your time, your energy, and your candor in the Q&A. And Glenna, I will turn it over to you to close us out.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. This concludes our presentation. As mentioned, you will be able to access the recording on demand by using the registration link that you used to sign up to attend this webinar. Thanks for your attendance today, and have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye now.